Welcome to the latest episode of X Factor, and particularly excited about today's conversation because in the notion of leadership, you've got private equity, which decides that we're going to hire world-class individual A players, and that is the goal, but it's presumed that this arranged marriage between newly hired executives will result in a team that gels and hits its full stride. And that's just an assumption that doesn't always play out. In fact, I might argue it plays out far less frequently than it does on the good side. And so to help us unpack this, we're joined today by Carson Tate of Carson Tate Consulting, and Carson's practice is executive coaching and strategic leadership and employee engagement consulting with a special focus on private equity backed mid-market companies, so near and dear to our hearts here at Falcon. So with that said, Carson, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rob. I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Okay, great. So I gave just a little bit of a preview about your background, but tell us a little bit more about your practice and how you work with companies.
Yes. So my practice is grounded in great theory, but we are very action oriented and really want to understand what your goals and objectives are, unlock those impediments that are getting in your way, or give you really good tools and strategies and playbooks to help you optimize both individual and team performance.
Well said. Under the high stakes environment of a private equity hold period where time is not our friend. So great. So we alluded to the premise early on, but this idea that, Falcon will get engaged, for example, let's just walk through an imaginary scenario. You've got a company that was acquired in 2023. We've been engaged to help the founder move to the board by hiring a new CEO. And of course, there's never been a real CFO in this business before since it was founder led. So by standards of private equity, they want somebody who's better positioned there. And wouldn't you know it, there's probably going to be a chief revenue or head of sales new hire and a couple of other folks to round out the executive team. In this scenario, you've got expert hiring processes being executed by whatever retained search firms involved, and of course, a very talented and informed board of directors. But what you've got as the outcome are 4 or 5 really talented individuals who are each expected, I think, to gel together. So let's say this company, despite having a fully stocked leadership cupboard, is not quite hitting its stride. And all of a sudden, one day they say, maybe we need some help, and they reach out to Carson. So what does it look like when you first hear from a company and they're struggling with some of these symptoms? How do you get engaged, and how does the whole process start?
So the first thing that would happen would be really understanding what is and is not working. So a conversation with the CEO, typically with the rest of the executive team. Where would you say you're on track against your performance metrics? Where are you off track? What isn't working within the dynamics of the team? So we don't have trust. We're not communicating well. We're missing targets. I just flat out don't like them, whatever is coming up. So, but an assessment of that, and typically the presenting problem is not the real problem. So, for example, let's say it is we aren't communicating well. Well, what's really going on is they don't trust each other, and they feel like they're getting in each other's lanes and trying to prove themselves to the board in a way that's undermining the collective performance of the team. So first step, assess what's going on. You could also use, and we like to use assessments as well. Then once you kind of understand what's going on, it's holding the mirror up to the team. Here's what we're hearing. Here's what we're seeing. How does this track with your experience? Typically, I like to use an assessment at this point if they're open to it, so we can look at the dynamics of the team. What is your personality? How are you showing up under stress? Collectively, what's going on with the team? And then we look at how do we optimize individual strengths, and whatever your weaknesses are, how do we leverage the team through awareness? Then where we're going to end up after we've done this deep dive, self-reflection, understanding the team dynamics, we're going to build something that I call a designed alliance. And the designed alliance is designed, it's co-created with the team, and it is an alliance of how we will work together. So we are talking about behavioral norms. We will not create an alliance that says something like, listen. No, what does listening actually look like? So it could be we have a device free room unless we need to reference something. It could be we restate what we hear and check for understanding. So the designed alliance outlines behaviors, how we will work together, and how we're going to support each other in our alliance to achieve our goals. Then, once it's created, try it out. Of course, Rob, as you know, I mean, we're human, right? The first time we tried, it's a mess, right? I don't do it well. I get mad. Things, okay, great. But we're in the game. And then once we have things that aren't working, we start to correct those by leveraging the things that aren't working in our alliance.
Mm-hmm. Can't wait to get into all that, and what a great term, designed alliance, because you do need allies in the pursuit of liquidity. These mandates are difficult enough when everything's working for you. You don't need friendly fire or self-inflicted team wounds to hold you back.
Um,
Yeah.
and, when you co-create, when as the CFO, I'm really aligned with my CRO, we have a mutual shared goal. We know what our EBITDA, we know what our exit is, we know what that looks like, and we create an alliance of how we both bring our strengths to it. That's where the team will start to win.
So let's go back to the early phase of the process where you're sort of doing that initial assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hearing some hints of some prerequisites that you need to exist within teams in order for this to unfold. And a few that are coming to my mind is even if trust hasn't been established yet, the capacity to trust, maybe vulnerability, the willingness to look in the mirror and understand where you're doing well and where you might be able to get a bit better without too much defensiveness. What else comes to mind in terms of some of the fertile ground of management team traits that let you do your best work?
Mm-hmm. And you touched on the one that's really probably the most salient and important for me with the vulnerability. It's self-awareness. The most impactful leaders are radically self-aware, which means I can look at myself and I can look at myself in situations with a level of neutrality and grace to see how I'm showing up and then correct that behavior. So part of it is my job is to create a condition where we can really do that self-awareness without being hijacked by shame or judgment or guilt, and really make sure that that is an opportunity for us to really own our piece of the interaction and that relationship, because it takes two. So I need that person to be radically self-aware around how they're showing up when they interact with you, Rob, so that we can start to work on that, what is and is not working.
So much of that feeds into what private equity wants anyway. And in no particular order, they want accountability. And how can you take accountability for something if you're not self-aware of your role in said success or setback?
Absolutely. So I like to talk to my executives. I'm like, we're going to own and clean up what I call your side of the street. So the only person you can control is yourself. And so we're going to really get clean and clear on your behaviors, how you're showing up on your side of the street. Then I'm going to look at the other side of the street, which is my colleague, and for them to clean it up. But we have another piece that we have to consider here, which is the context or the situation. So we have my piece of the action in the relationship, your piece of the action, your side of the street, my side of the street, and then the container in which we're working. So if I'm working with a team, I have to work on 3 levels. You as the individual, the team as the collective, and the system in which we're operating. So we have to optimize each one. Self-awareness, interaction within the team, and then do I have a system that's reinforcing the behaviors that I want? And that's where that designed alliance starts to help us with the system.
Mm-hmm. And so when you get into a typical engagement, I'm sure you've got a champion or two, some circumspect but open-minded folks, and then some perhaps borderline cynics. What does that look like when you're getting to know all the players in a situation?
Rob, were you in my last meeting? Because that's exactly what's happening. So before it's a collective, I think as I mentioned, I've spent time one-on-one with each of them, right? So I can kind of get below the surface. And in that one-on-one, it's very quickly naming what might be coming up for them. And so for the cynic, most of the time as a human, it's fear. So how do we look at what's the fear? What are we afraid of? Is it I'm not going to be successful. I'm not good enough. This team isn't going to be successful. I haven't completely bought into this thesis. Whatever it is, we're going to bring it up, look at it, and then start to name it so that we can start to create strategies to mitigate it. And oftentimes, the other way we can go about it, if I haven't been able to shift it in that individual, is using the collective peer pressure. So we have the advocate, the person who's somewhat bought in. We will really use the positive peer pressure as we start to make strides to bring along the skeptic.
Yeah, I was on a call recently with a mid-market sponsor, and one of the traits they really crave is what they call learning agility. And of course, that means a lot to different folks, but the net of it for me is it doesn't matter how much success a person has had historically, although we do like those traits, it's kind of meaningless if you can't reconstitute it in this new environment, because the hardest job you'll ever have is your next or current job. And too many executives, I think, want to rest on their laurels of what's worked in the past. And so I would guess evolutionary traits and adaptability, and I'd say even more than adaptability, like proactive evolution, would be a welcome trait for you and for me in the work that we do.
Absolutely. Willingness to learn and grow. Absolutely. And even if you haven't seen that trait, Rob, one thing that I can introduce to my executives is how we're going to change, like understanding the theory. And the first one is around awareness that something needs to change for us to hit our target. So we can just open up that aperture. Yeah, this does need to change. All right. And then if I can move them to acceptance, I care about this goal, this mutual shared goal. I accept that something needs to change. And in that acceptance, there's a skill, then we're there. Okay, there's a new skill to learn because of where I want to go.
So instead of the stages of grief, we're talking about the X number of stages of change that go from acceptance to overcoming one's fear to internalizing it, metabolizing it, making it happen, or something like that.
Got it. And there are 5 steps. Awareness is the first step. Awareness is something needs to change. So this team is not performing. We are not hitting our targets. So we create awareness, data, conversations, reflection. Then the second step is acceptance. Okay, we're not on track. We care about this target. I accept that there's something I don't know, or maybe there's something I need to do differently. That's the second step. The third step is that skill piece. This is where we need to learn something. So it could be we have a designed alliance, but we also need to learn how to have conversations when the stakes are high and emotions are high. That's a skill. We can learn that. And once we have the skill, then we have this integration. That's the fourth step on the change curve. So I need to integrate this new knowledge, this new experience into the executive team meetings and out into our organization. And then after integration is mastery, where I'm unconsciously competent. I just automatically engage in these new behaviors, these new thought patterns without having to think about it. Mm-hmm. So when you're working with a team, you're moving both the individual team contributors up the curve and you're moving the team collectively up the change curve.
I'm picturing a 4-box model where you could put people into, on one axis, propensity for change, high or low, and then self-awareness, high or low, because I'm guessing you have more people than we might like in the box of, sure, I believe we need to change, but I'm good to go. it's everybody else that needs to step their game up.
Absolutely. Hmm. Yes. And you know what? We're all human and we all at points will be there. And so that's where we've got to lean in a little bit more on the awareness piece. What data, what assessments, what 360, what business performance data? How do we just help them see, hey, there's a piece here that you're contributing to?
Mhm. So let's say we're underway with the engagement and we've identified a couple of opportunities on the team. And let's talk about person A first. Person A has the propensity to change, but is dealing with some fear and some imposter syndrome. How much time do you want to spend with them in a bit of a pause on the broader engagement to help them sort of build some of that muscle so that they can carry their fair share of the new designed alliance agreement versus building the plane while you're flying it?
Well, I mean, what PE firm hasn't built the plane while flying it with duct tape? So we're going to do the same. So I want to work a parallel path. So I'm going to be working with that individual executive over helping them overcome their fear and imposter syndrome while also helping that team come together. So, right, remember we work on 3 different levels to affect change: individual, team, and system. The team and system are going to create an environment where this person can step in, hopefully, and start to thrive. Right? Okay, I can practice. This is what's being asked of me. I need to step up so we can start to drive that behavior change
Mhm.
there.
So, how about person B, who's got some of the same issues but has no propensity for change, and you need to have a tough conversation with the CEO and or board that the CFO or the head of revenue is not a constructive member of this go forward team. What happens to your engagement then, presuming that they agree with you and want to make that change, knowing it takes a few months to find a more well-suited executive?
Mm-hmm. So the first thing, let's say it's the CFO. Well, the first thing that I'm going to make sure we're doing is that the CEO is giving clear, actionable, real-time feedback. So if you are not helping that person gain awareness of how they are not in alignment with the designed alliance, or their behavior is not aligned with their performance metrics, that's a problem. We want to first see if we can start to ignite some change. If you are giving that feedback and it is time bound, what you need to see, and it's not changing, then we need to exit. And the exit should be very clear. So I always say it's not a surprise when the person is asked to move on. It's a gut check. But if you have been giving that feedback, that person is aware that their performance is not on track. They
Mhm.
exit, and then we're going to have a gap. When you bring a new member in, we're going to have to start the forming and storming process again, but we want to do it faster. We have a designed alliance in place. Hopefully, there's been a little bit more insight around the person who would be a good fit on this team so that we can continue to move forward.
So proceed with the design alliance while the search is unfolding, deliver a mostly finished product that also helps really inform the selection
Mm-hmm.
of this next executive hire, and then onboard them and ramp them into the business that much more quickly and effectively.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And in the interview process, uh, you are being very intentional about the culture, right? The culture of this executive team, of the company. This is how we show up. This is how we work together. Because you want them to opt in, and you also want the ability to opt out of them.
Mhm. When you're in your engagements, I wonder how you deal with helping people be honest with you. One of my theories, backed up by some research that we do on a monthly basis, is that executives are under a lot of pressure in these portcos, and they're hesitant to signal any doubt in the minds of their sponsors that they are not fully squared away and good to go, when the reality is every executive has gaps and needs help. And so how much of your work is designed to create a space where they can tell you the truth versus what they've been programmed to communicate?
That is my job. is to create that safe place where we can have those conversations, that level of vulnerability and trust, where it's not about, I'm not punitive. All I'm here to do is support and equip and empower them for their success. And the more I know and the more you're able to share, the faster we can work on these things. And that's where the confidentiality, when we run parallel paths of the one-on-one executive coaching, it's you and me, we're doing our work. And then we have our team, we're doing our work with the team. That's so important. The other thing, and you've probably seen this in your process, I always tell my clients, it's going to come out sideways. We can push it down, we can try to hide it, but it will always come out, and it will come out in the most inopportune times.
Boy, isn't that absolutely the truth? It's not avoiding the discomfort, it's delaying and amplifying it.
Yes. I mean, I had an executive who I didn't know this many cuss words existed when they unloaded on their board chair. And I was like, oh, okay. Now we've got cleanup on multiple aisles. And that's because we had been pressing down and really denying some things that were challenging and were coming up both personally and professionally. It's going to come out, particularly in high stakes, really tight time frame. It will come out. So let's deal with it before it comes out that way.
Yeah, the pressure involved is sort of like a microwave impact on on an unpopped kernel of popcorn, and it's just a matter of time.
It's just a matter of time. And we can work with it, right? As a positive forcing function for change. We can really embrace it and use it that way. Or it really can become a forcing function that just leads ultimately to, I would say in this case, that was a pretty strong professional brand hit for the CEO.
Yeah, I would say so. So let's talk designed alliance. Just give us more insight into what that really is, some of the operating elements of it, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. So it is, as I said earlier, a designed alliance between the members of the team, the members of the executive team, which means it's co-created. So the first place we start is, what is the mutual shared purpose or goal of the executive team? We know our numbers, we know our exit, we know what we're here to do. And then we ask ourselves, how do we want to get there collectively as a team? So the how piece, we know what the what is, it's the goal. Why it matters, we know what that is. And now the designed alliance is our how piece, how we're going to operate. And this looks like, Robin's session, just a really big brainstorming session. Well, I really want to come here and be able to share ideas and get feedback and not feel judged. Okay. Behaviorally, what do we need to do to create that condition for radical candor, excellent, clear feedback, and support through a decisioning process? It takes time. It's usually multiple sessions before you get a list of, and I can't stress this enough, behaviors that we're going to agree to.
Mm-hmm. And I would theorize that it's less important what the designed alliance looks like. In other words, one's not any better than another. It's how real and sincerely adopted and uniform it is across the team.
Exactly. And I will say, I don't have any design alliances with my executive teams that are really that alike. They're all unique to that team and to that organization. But to your point, it's the willingness to actually use it. So, for example, I have an executive team and they're building theirs. And one of their opportunities is around listening. And their managing partner, CEO, he likes the title managing partner, but their CEO has a tendency to interrupt. So you're talking, he interrupts you, finishes your sentence, and then goes off on a tangent. Not helpful and really annoying, and you feel dismissed and demeaned. So the listening component on the designed alliance for them is to say, we'll call them Charles, you just interrupted me. I'm going to finish. So the behavior is, we call out when Charles does that. It becomes a pattern interrupt. He sees it. and I finish. So that's one of the behaviors under we are going to listen to each other that they've adopted. Now, is it awkward when you get started? Yes. Does he like it all the time? No. Is it important? Yes.
And I think for the teams where it really hits home, there's probably some eventual humor in there where Charles is interrupting, one of their colleagues starts to go with the scripted line, and he then laughs and finishes it for them. Yes, no, I
Yes.
interrupted and you're going to finish.
Yeah.
And eventually the behavior starts to change.
It does. You're exactly right. I'm a huge fan of humor and play because that lights up different centers in our brains where we can be more collaborative, more innovative. And it just takes the pressure off a little bit. So I'll give you another example of where we've used some humor and how we've done this. So I have another executive team, and the CFO, shockingly, doesn't align with the normal CFO behavior. However, she is excessively verbal, and there is an excessive verbalization of ideas, excessive verbalization of ideas. And so we now call it Evie. So on the team, when someone is being Evie, they have this Muppet character that sits in their boardroom and they just kind of push it all across the table. And everybody laughs. You're getting Evie. You're getting this silly Muppet. We all laugh. It's a pattern interrupt and we can keep going. But what eventually happens is that the behavior does stop, right? So I start to self-correct and we start to move into more productive ways of communicating.
Yeah, we all go through that process of, okay, there's not much of a filter. Wait a minute. I've had this Muppet slid across the conference room table in 3 consecutive board meetings. I'm about to say something, but wait a minute. I'm feeling the Muppet. I'm just going to hit pause, or I'm going to be more succinct. I'm going to get more to the point. That's
Right.
that's a lot of fun. That I think on the surface, that's something that people might kind of roll their eyes at as kind of silly, but I find it to be really compelling.
Well, great. Roll your eyes. It works every time.
Yeah.
Because what we've done here is we've depersonalized it. So we haven't shamed or made my CFO wrong. We've said this is part of our designed alliance. This is how we're going to handle it. We use a little humor, a little grace. We get the change we want. So at the end of the day, I want the change. And I'd rather do it with grace and humor.
Is it fair to say that a designed alliance is a highly organized set of collaborative values?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And when we're done with this exercise, Rob, the brainstorming, I like it to call it kind of a designed alliance placemat. So you can envision a PowerPoint slide or a Word doc, or if you're an Excel person, it can be an Excel, doesn't matter. But it is the list of behaviors. And as we are working through it, my recommendation is it's always available in our meetings, virtually or in person, as our placemat and our guide.
Mm-hmm. And how do you go about making sure it coexists nicely with pre-existing sets of cultural or core values?
And if we have 5 core values, we want to look at what are the behaviors associated with those, and then what's the linkage into it. So we just combine them.
Yeah. And then do you leave the designed alliance at the exec team, or do you encourage clients to replicate throughout the organization all the way down through department supervisors?
I'm so glad you asked. Yes. So let's master it at the executive level and then cascade it all the way down, all teams. So we look at every team building their own designed alliance. Now, within a company, you will see that connectivity, that thread of core values will run all the way through those designed alliances. But the team will have their own unique behaviors and norms that work for them that address some of their sticky spots or challenges.
Mhm. I'm going to say pause for a minute. Do you want to take care of your dog, or are we okay? It's up to you.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you still hear the other one?
I cannot.
Okay. Okay, good. It was just my female. She's now in here with us. She thinks she's good at podcasting.
Yeah, well, perfect. And it was barely audible, but I thought it might be a distraction for you. So Brianna will edit our brief intermission out, and we'll pick back up on it. So, okay, so let me get my mind back in gear. Anything else, Carson, that I didn't ask about Designed Alliance that we want our audiences to understand?
I've said this multiple times. I just really want to underscore it. It's behaviors, right? It's what I'm doing or not doing. So a well-formed Designed Alliance makes it crystal clear on how I show up and what I do or do not do when we're communicating or working together.
Mhm. So that makes tremendous sense to me at the team level. I'm wondering if there's ever a dimension to incorporate some of the private equity firm's needs. For example, there's a couple maxims that I've heard time and again, like good news fast, bad news faster, as reported up to the board.
Absolutely.
Communicate in data and facts rather than anecdotes, things of that nature. Is this
I apologize. I think you just froze. Let me give it a second.
kind of limited to the team, or they're here as well?
Rob, I'm going to ask for a pause. You froze mid-question.
Yeah, that's right. So it's telling me I'm unstable, which is unsatisfactory. So let me try that again. Is my voice coming through clearly?
Your voice is coming through clearly. Thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
let me try that question again, and once again, Ree will take good care of us. So everything you're saying, Carson, makes total sense about how the team, with your assistance, can create the right alliance. Is there ever any consideration for the private equity firm as a stakeholder? For example, a couple maxims that come to mind: good news fast, bad news faster. So should something like that be included? I've also heard lots of complaints over the years that sometimes trigger a search for us, like, gosh, we want people that communicate in data and facts, not anecdotes. So is it limited to the team, or do you consider the private equity firm's needs as well?
You absolutely have to consider the private equity firm's needs. And so I love the communicate and facts and data, not anecdotes. So what does that mean on the behaviors? So at the executive team, what would we do and not do to do that? And then how would we cascade that information up?
Mm-hmm. Yep, terrific. So to me, this is very intricate, complex, and essential. I don't know what the math formula would be, but if you've got 5 management team members operating in relative silos, they're going to be outperformed by a factor of 5 or 10 to 1, if not greater, by a team that's on the same page, rowing together. Why do you think this concept is not fully appreciated, or maybe a little on the misunderstood side, where we don't see it unfold in every portco?
I think it falls under that category, Rob, of this feels a little soft. This is maybe intuitive. These are A players. They should know how to play well in the sandbox. Like, come on, we don't really need to help them figure this out. And the truth of it is, yes, they are A players, and there are skills and strategies and tools, as we've talked about, that enable them to work together more effectively and faster. And I think that, we're chasing pretty aggressive goals. And the thought is, well, I need to address what's happening with sales. I need to get clean financials before we think about team dynamics.
Yeah, and they each come to the table from different conditioning environments where they've believed that a certain approach is generally acceptable and or the right approach, and you start to bring competing ideas together, and everyone's right, but no one's wrong. It gets tricky.
It does get tricky. And I think we also have to recognize as humans, we're going to keep doing what's worked for us in the past. I mean, these are highly successful, intelligent folks, and they're being hired for a reason. So until I bump up against where it's no longer working for me, that catalyst to change isn't there.
Mhm. Even something as straightforward as a management incentive unit grant. Okay, I'm a CXO at a Portco.
Mhm.
I've been granted a certain number of shares. I can do the math on enterprise value and what my liquidity event will look like. But maybe I should stop obsessing over my own liquidity event and think more about how can we maximize the value of the MIU pool? Because when that happens, we all win. And of course, I win by definition.
That's the collective, right? Us anchoring into the collective goal. And if that pool is larger than the individual, that's a win for everyone.
So, Carson, how can folks find you and reach out to you to learn more about your services?
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn, Carson Tate. You can always email me, carson@carsontateconsulting.com, and find me on the web, carsontate.com.
Okay, well, this has been wonderful. As we said at the outset, I can't think of another asset class where a disparate third party in the form of the board is responsible for a majority of the key hires, and it's presumed that they will gel and work together. And anything shy of an intentional, skilled approach to optimizing that team dynamic. If you really believe in team, you've got to take a hard look at this stuff.
You absolutely do. And the bottom line for me is when people thrive, your business thrives.
Outstanding, Carson. Solid gold. Thank you for some great insights and
Thanks,
a
Ron.
wonderful conversation. And we'll have to have you back again sometime.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it. Thanks for the opportunity.
My pleasure.